A single dad rents a room to a college girl not knowing she's a billionaire's daughter. Full story, Part 1, complete. The morning sun spilled across the quiet suburban street as if it were trying to touch the life of a man who had long forgotten what warmth felt like. In a tiny, weather-worn house with pale blue walls and a roof that still bore the scars of last year's storm, a single father named Rowan Marlowe sat by the kitchen table staring at a stack of unpaid bills. His fingers trembled faintly as he ran them through his unshaven jaw, eyes hollow from sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. Life had been scraping him raw for months, threatening to break him entirely. But Rowan had one reason left to keep standing: his 7-year-old daughter, Miran, an angel with tangled brown hair and bright hopeful eyes who deserved far more than the life he was barely managing to provide. And on that ordinary morning, when desperation met a sliver of courage, Rowan posted an online listing to rent out the spare room in his home, not knowing that it would change everything. Not knowing that the girl who answered the ad carried a secret worth more than all his worries combined. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that heal the heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal before we go deeper. It truly helps keep these stories alive. Rowan had once been comfortable, even happy. He had a stable job as a construction site supervisor and a wife, Lisa, who filled their home with sunlight just by stepping into a room. But illness came for her swiftly and cruelly 2 years ago, leaving Rowan shattered and alone with their small daughter. Hospital bills consumed everything they had saved. Grief robbed him of direction. Work hours dried up. And before long, Rowan found himself balancing 2 part-time jobs, caring for a child who missed her mother more than she could express, and dragging the weight of loneliness like an anchor behind him. The spare room in the house had been Lisa's art studio once, filled with canvases of sunrise landscapes and unfinished sketches of Miran's tiny hands. Renting it out felt like trespassing on memories, but Rowan had reached the point where emotion could no longer compete with survival. The roof needed repairs. The heating bill was overdue. And groceries were reduced to a list of only the cheapest essentials. So when a college student named Araya Venn messaged him about the room, polite, articulate, and asking if she could move in immediately, he didn't hesitate. She said her campus housing had fallen through. She needed a quiet place to study. And she could pay 3 months of rent up front. Rowan could hardly believe his luck. He didn't know her last name meant anything. He didn't know the world whispered it in newspapers and business magazines. He didn't know her father, Castle Venn, was one of the wealthiest tech magnates in the country, a billionaire with an empire that stretched across oceans. Rowan only knew she was a 19-year-old student looking for a room. The day Araya arrived, the sun was high and soft, painting the sky with a calm, pure blue. A modest taxi pulled up to the curb, and Rowan expected to see a girl holding designer luggage and wearing the kind of confidence that only money could buy. Instead, he saw a slender young woman with warm beige skin, long dark hair tied in a simple braid, faded jeans, and a worn olive-green backpack. She looked more like someone running away from something than approaching a new chapter. Rowan tried not to stare. She was gentle in the way a quiet song is gentle, soft but meaningful. Her eyes were observant, thoughtful, a little sad. She thanked him with a calm sincerity that reminded him painfully of Lisa's kindness. Miran, curious and bright as always, peeked from behind Rowan's leg, watching the newcomer with wide eyes. Araya gave her a small wave, and Miran smiled shyly, clutching the stuffed bunny she carried everywhere. Inside, Rowan apologized for the old furniture, the dated wallpaper, the floorboard that creaked near the hallway. But Araya didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she touched the windowsill with appreciative fingers and whispered that the sunlight here felt peaceful. She accepted the room without hesitation, settled in with surprising ease, and over the next few days, Rowan discovered that her presence had begun weaving something gentle into the house again. Araya always woke early and studied in the backyard, where the morning light draped itself across the grass. She would help Miran prepare her school bag or tie her shoelaces when Rowan was running late for work. She washed her own dishes, cleaned her room, and occasionally left a warm loaf of bread or homemade soup in the kitchen with a small note thanking Rowan for sharing his home. Rowan didn't understand why someone so young, so gentle, and so quietly polished had chosen to live in a small house with a struggling single father and a child. But Araya never caused trouble, never complained, and never acted entitled. She simply fit. But what Rowan didn't know was that Araya was hiding. The daughter of a billionaire, she had grown up surrounded by luxury, guarded everywhere she went. Every step of her life had been managed, every decision policed, every move judged by the press or by advisors who pretended to care. Her father loved her, but he loved control more. He treated her future as an investment, trying to dictate her degree, her friendships, even the people she smiled at. And when he arranged for her to attend a private international program she never wanted, Araya packed a small bag and quietly slipped out of the mansion at dawn, choosing freedom over golden captivity. But freedom came with loneliness. And uncertainty. And a quiet ache in her chest that she had never known before. The Marlowe home, small and imperfect as it was, felt like the first real place she could breathe. One afternoon, while Rowan was fixing the bicycle Mirren used to ride to school, Araya stepped outside with a glass of lemonade for him. The sun was crisp and bright overhead, warm enough to soften the edges of all their worries. Rowan accepted the drink with a grateful nod and tried to hide how exhausted he was. He had come home early after his second job cut his hours again. Araya watched him silently, noticing the weariness in his shoulders, the frayed fabric of his work shirt, the way he kept checking his phone as though expecting bad news. And then came the moment that changed the direction of their lives. Rowan collapsed. One instant he was tightening a bolt on the bicycle, the next, he slumped to the ground, dizzy, breathless, overwhelmed by months of stress and skipped meals. Araya rushed to him, heart pounding. Mirren burst into tears, kneeling beside her father. Rowan insisted he was fine, just tired, but Araya's sharp eyes saw more. She realized he had been pushing himself far beyond what his body could handle. She also realized he had no one else, no family nearby, no partner, no safety net. That night, while Rowan slept on the couch with a blanket around him, Araya sat by the small dining table, scrolling through her phone with trembling fingers. She looked at her father's missed calls, dozens of them, and then at the news articles speculating about her disappearance. But she didn't return his calls. She didn't tell him where she was. Instead, she made a choice. If Rowan had given her a home when she needed one, then she would help him rebuild his life in return. Over the next week, Araya quietly paid close attention to everything: how Rowan always ate last after ensuring Mirren had enough, how he skipped meals entirely when the groceries were low, how he declined invitations from coworkers because he couldn't afford small luxuries, how he stayed up late planning how to stretch his remaining savings. Araya had lived in wealth her entire life, but she had never seen true generosity until she met Rowan Marlowe, a man who gave even when he had nothing. So she began helping in subtle ways. She found part-time work at a local library to contribute more rent than Rowan asked for. She repaired a loose cabinet door herself. She bought Mirren a small sketchbook, just like the ones Lissa once used, and encouraged her to draw the things she loved. She cooked extra portions without making it obvious she was trying to feed Rowan. And in the sunlight-filled backyard, she often sat with Mirren, teaching her little craft projects while Rowan worked, filling the home with soft laughter Rowan hadn't heard in years. But the turning point came on a bright Saturday morning. Rowan received a notice that the house was in danger of foreclosure if he couldn't cover the next payment soon. He didn't tell Araya, but she saw him sitting alone in the kitchen staring at that letter long after Mirren went to sleep, his face buried in his hands. She felt her heart twist. She wasn't just living in his home now, she cared deeply for the people in it. It was time to stop hiding who she was. The next day, while Rowan was at work and Mirren was visiting a friend, Araya made a call she had been avoiding for weeks. She contacted her father's private attorney, not to return home, not to submit to her father's demands, but to access the trust fund legally reserved for her education and personal needs. Money that belonged to her, money she had never used, money she now needed not for herself but for the man who had unknowingly saved her spirit. Within days, she settled Rowan's mortgage notice anonymously through the attorney, leaving no hint of her involvement. Rowan was stunned when he received the letter stating his loan had been paid.